Welcome to the Mastery Club 10 Lessons Online Adventure. We're up to session number 9, the 9th lesson, which is they're not just ideas. But before we start, let's take a moment, pause the video, grab that piece of paper and write down those few things. What's your goal? What have you done in this last week? What have you achieved? What have you learnt? Right? Have that moment of reflection. So pause the video now to do that. And then when you've done that, pause it again to have your moment of visualization. So remember to take yourself through the steps of breathing deeply, relaxing, creating a visual picture of that moment when you're doing the thing that's really important to you, when you're achieving it. And then get yourself right inside that scene. Get yourself to the point where you feel tears of gratitude welling into your eyes because you're so grateful that you've achieved this thing that's so important to you. So pause the video and take a moment to do that. And now, let's have a look at this 9th lesson. They're not just ideas. You know, at this stage, having been through 8 lessons, Nina's uncle, Nuncle, says to the kids, you know, a lot of adults know this material, they know this information, but they don't always apply it. So what do you want to be? An expert of ideas or a master of results? And that's the question I put to you. What do you want to be? An expert of ideas or a master of results? It's all very well to have all this as information sitting in our heads, but it's really much better, I reckon, you know, if we can tick off those things off our list, that we've actually achieved things that are important to us. And the comfort zone is comfortable, right? Which is where we can just sit and read a book. But taking the ideas out of the book, so it's not just a story, and putting them into your life, that's where the real satisfaction comes. This session, the 9th session, is all about listening to a real story, a real person who has set a goal and faced and dealt with all the obstacles along the way in order to achieve it. I'm going to sit in the hot seat and share my personal story with you today, but you keep your eye on the Mastery Club website and forum, because I'm going to be building a big bank of interviews with people who will share their stories about how they achieved their goal or their dream despite whatever obstacles stood in their way. Stand by. So here's my story regarding the application of these principles. You see, I started reading books like this when I was a teenager. The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, The Cosmic Power Within You, Psycho-Cybernetics, The Dynamic Laws of Healing, The Prosperity Secrets of the Ages, The Master Key System, Working with the Law, Think and Grow Rich. Those were the kinds of books that I loved reading as a teenager, because they were filled with these fascinating stories about people who applied a certain thought, either aloud or silently or in writing, over a period of time, and their circumstances were transformed. And I was really captivated by that, you know, that we can use our language both to create imaginary worlds for the purpose of entertainment, and also to deliberately create our reality, our real world, the world that we're living in. And so, you know, I'd read these books, Anne Louise Hay, you know, all those kinds of books, and I'd apply the affirmations, and then I'd kind of look around and see if there was a change in my life. And if nothing seemed to have changed, I'd sort of think, oh, that doesn't work. And over a period of time, that was what happened. You know, I'd say an affirmation or 2 or 3 here and there, look around, no change. And I came to the conclusion that that stuff works for the people in these books, and it didn't work for me. You know, the subtitle of the Mastery Club, and in fact the motto of the Mastery Club, is see the invisible, hear the silent, do the impossible. And what that means is that if we're going to demonstrate mastery in our lives, we have to be able to take our attention away from appearances, how things look, that solid, illusory stuff, and hold a vision of how we would like things to be. And I was very good at reacting to appearances. You know, if my kids were squabbling, I'd think I was a terrible mother. Things like that. I actually got to a very low point in my life when I really did feel like a failure. I felt like a failure as a mother, and a failure as a wife, and a failure as a writer, because even though I'd had the odd story published here and there or win a prize here and there, I hadn't really had any great results. You know, I felt as if it was all passing me by and maybe I should give up on being a writer, and I was never going to achieve anything or have anything significant published. And so when I got to this really low point in my life, that was when the penny dropped, I think, and I really made a decision to apply these principles in a significant way, not just for a few minutes here and there and look for a change, but to actually really commit to them and stick with them until I got the results I was looking for. And so that's when I started walking in the park and saying a set of 3 affirmations, and the first one was, my words and thoughts determine my destiny, because I really did believe that to be true. And the second one was, I am in charge of my words and thoughts, which brought in a lot more sense of responsibility there. And the third one was, the faster I change my language to empowering phrases, the faster I transform my life. And so that was where a lot more responsibility came to bear. And so I would say these 3 phrases every day at the park, 10 times each, and a few other phrases as well, so that I was affirming at least 100 affirmations a day while I walked my dog at the park. And I also noticed I had a thought, nobody wants what I have to offer. And so I flipped that one around and I began to declare my contribution, my loving service, my creative gifts are valued and wanted, and the universe delights in paying me richly for them. That's the dog you can hear walking around in here. That's the dog that I went to the park with. So she's heard all of my affirmations. She's just come to say hello. So I did the affirmations and I began to visualize. I think I might have mentioned that already. Sitting and visualizing my family as a loving unit, even though we were really not at the time. And the third thing I did was I took a leap of faith and started to do what I loved, started to trust my heart. So I did less work in the business that I was in at the time that I cared about, but it wasn't my first love, And I started to do more writing and send stories out to competitions and sort of get back in the game. And I started to win a few things. And then I got to work on the Mastery Club because I'd had this thought, for quite some years, this idea at the back of my mind, a story about a girl with an interest in magic and a girl with an interest in the laws of the universe who meet. And together they form a club to support each other in achieving their goals and dreams. And this idea and this title, the Mastery Club, had been kicking around at the back of my mind for years. And so I got going on it. But hang on, I've leapt ahead. You see, that was what I was doing in 2005. But in 2002, when I was moving into that low ebb in my life, I wrote an affirmation that went like this. I was involved in personal growth programs at the time, and one of the things we were asked to do was to create 1-year, 5-year plans. So in 2002, I wrote an affirmation that was, it is 2007, and I am a successfully published writer, popularizing the laws of the universe, and I am richly rewarded. My book came out, The Mastery Club, came out in 2006. By 2007, we had sold out the first print run, and so I was feeling very richly rewarded as an author of a book that was popularizing the laws of the universe. There is something to those affirmations. So, teenager, learning all the stuff. Adult, giving up. Low spot. Setting a new intention and starting to apply myself, because they're not just ideas, right? Got to apply them. And so, here's the thing, right? I decided that I wanted to write this story, the Mastery Club, for my kids and for other kids around the world. So that was my goal, that was my intention, to write and have the Mastery Club published. Was it a smart goal? Let's have a look. I just about feel like saying in play school, let's look through the round window. Okay, was my goal simple and specific? Yes, write and have the book published. Okay. Was it meaningful and measurable? Absolutely. Very meaningful to me and measurable. You either end up with a book or you don't. Was it achievable? Yes. Was it action-oriented? Wait and you'll hear about that part. There were a lot of actions I had to take. Was it realistic and responsible? Yeah, it's quite realistic. Although I did get quite a few reality checks along the way as to what was involved. Was it responsible? Yes, I took responsibility for achieving that goal. Timed, I set a time frame, and yep, we had to keep adjusting the time frame as we kind of learnt what was involved in publishing a book, and it all took longer than you think. Tense, well, do you remember when I read that goal to you? It actually was written in present tense. I am a successfully published writer, popularising universal laws, and I am richly rewarded. So it was in present tense. And the test, remember, is does that feel good? Does that really sit well with you? And yes, of course, it does, it did, right? So let's have a look at the process for me, okay? It's all very well to set the goal. What about the challenges, the obstacles, the support systems, all this other stuff we've been speaking about through this whole course so far? So the first step was writing the book. That was the fun part. Then there was the editing. Also fun, very interesting, very intense process for me, working with my editor Tim Marlowe on the metaphysical content in the book and the grammar, all of that sort of stuff. So that was a very detailed, focused part of the process for me, very interesting and rewarding. And then there was sending the manuscript out to a few readers, children and adults, and getting some feedback back to find out, was I just a legend in my own lunchbox, or had I actually created something that was going to have an impact out in the world? So that was a great experience. The next step was to take the book from a manuscript to a book, right? And so there were decisions to be made. I started off approaching established publishers, the large publishers, and they turned me down. I tried a literary agent who loved the book, but when the first publisher she sent it to turned it down, she turned the whole project down. Then I tried a few small publishers who were very interested, but they actually said they didn't think they would do justice to the book. So then I tried what's called a vanity press, where you actually pay them to publish the book yourself. But when my husband and I looked at the breakdown, we then looked at each other, and we thought, well, you can do that, and I can do that, and you can do that, and I can do that. I knew I could knock on doors and talk to people, and he could do all the technical stuff, the laying out of the book. And so we said, let's do it ourselves. And then we were up for a real learning curve. So we had to face things like sending specs to the printer, which is what kind of paper you want to use, the size of the book, the thickness, what kind of spine, binding, all these different decisions had to be made. We had to look at the cover. This cover was illustrated by my niece Jessica. She did a great job, didn't she? And then my husband Derek put the whole thing together. But this took months for us to figure it out because we were the blind leading the blind. We didn't really know what we were doing. It was a great journey. We learned a lot along the way, and I hope you're going to like the cover for the sequel, which is coming out. And then there were things to do like organising an ISBN, which is, each book has its own ISBN, its own number. It's coded in this huge database. And to get barcodes and to have the book catalogued with the National Library in Australia. And to figure out what would be the right retail price for it. So there were all these details. And we had the whole big learning curve of starting up our own website, because that was really new. In 2006, we'd never had a website before. So there was that, to establish a website and figure out what do you write and what do you put on one and how do you set up a shopping cart, and all of this sort of stuff that was there to do as well. And then putting together emails of thanks when people ordered, and it was this huge, huge journey. So there was a lot of challenge in this process. And of course, it was having a distributor, because it's all very well to publish a book. And just today, just about anyone can publish a book with printers and computers and all the rest of it. Just about anyone can do it. But it's all very well to publish it, but then what do you do with all the books sitting in your garage, when you've got boxes and boxes of books? So distribution is the real issue. How do you get the book out there? And the first distributor that I targeted, that I went to, didn't believe he would be able to find purchasers for my book. And so I thought, okay, and I went out and started door knocking at the bookstores myself. But 5 months later, when we had sold out our first print run of 2,000 books, and I communicated this to that distributor, he had an agreement to me the same day and took over that distribution of books to the bookstores, which was great. That was one less thing to do. So what were my support systems? We've talked about some of the challenges that I faced. My husband, amazing. Producing this book together was like having another child. There was so much involved, and he was a staunch supporter from day one and still is, and he makes my website and does all the stuff and is about to now start laying out the sequel. Who else? My children. They were the first listeners to the book because I read it to them and they loved it, which gave me a lot of encouragement. And then, of course, the other people who read the Mastery Club and gave me feedback and encouragement. And then there are amazing things like our bookkeeper telling us that he had a client who had a personal development company for kids and maybe he'd be interested in the book. And I contacted this man whose name was Robert Knorr. And he read the book, and do you know, he got back to me a few weeks later. It was just a manuscript at the time. It was just a sheaf of papers. And he got back to me and said, you know, I was sitting in meditation this morning and I got a message that I'm to support you with your book. What would you like? Time? Money? That was pretty significant because one of the challenges facing us was how were we going to fund the print run? We were going to need some $6,000 for that. Plus there was another a few $1,000s for the editor. There was a few $1,000s for the cover art. You know, there was so many things to pay for. In fact, let's stay on the topic of those challenges for the moment. So remember that the whole journey started with sending it out to publishers who rejected it. So I had my manuscript rejected quite a few times before we came out with the book. So that was a challenge I had to deal with. And not all of the readers totally loved it. There were some that had doubts and problems and issues with it, and I had to deal with that. And remember, there was that lack of belief of the distributor, right? And then there was the cover art, you know. Remember I said we was with the blind leading the blind. So there was a lot of times when we were really just going around in circles with that cover and not quite knowing what we were going to do. And some very nice people at a local bookshop helped us and gave us feedback. And so did a distributor from another company. So eventually we did get there, but it was a challenging journey. And there was the website, the setting up of the website and the unknownness of that journey. And all those little detail things, you know, the barcode and the ISBN and all the research, the little detail stuff, I didn't enjoy doing that stuff very much at all. I'm a big picture person, you know, and I like doing creative things. I don't much enjoy administrative detail. So I found that quite hard and quite challenging. And when we finally had our website just about ready and we had the book just about ready to go to the printers, we thought, let's have a book launch, which is a real party. It's like, let's have a birthday party to celebrate this book's coming into the world. And a friend of mine who was a published, established writer and storyteller and illustrator said to me, author, you know, published author, said to me, don't bother with a book launch. You know, it's a waste of time. Hardly anyone comes. You don't sell many books. And I thought, no, this is my book's birthday party. I definitely want to have a book launch. But there was that to deal with, you know, and the doubt, well, should I? And the cost of that then, you know, with providing refreshments and hiring a room and all of those things and organising a guest speaker. We're doing that again very soon for the sequel, The Hidden Order, so look out for your invitation. So there were lots and lots of challenges along the way and lots of support systems and lots of magic, like that fellow, Robert Knorr, who turned up and was in fact the doorway not only to having the Mastery Club come out into the world, because he provided a lot of support to me. Apart from being my fairy godfather saying, what would you like, you know, time or money, he actually followed through and did provide a lot of time and was one of the people who contributed to the funding of that first print run. So I'm very grateful to Robert. And then he actually opened the door to my having the book come out in China. So the Mastery Club is now printed in Mandarin by Oriental Press, which is pretty groovy too. And Robert Knorr was also the doorway to having these two books published because we did this together. So The Boy Who Barked, about Dr. John DeMartini, and The Boy Who Found His Pulse, about Don Tolman, the Champion series. And hopefully there'll be lots more in the Champion series sometime soon. How did I overcome the various challenges? Belief in myself, commitment, patience, persistence, lots and lots of that. And those bits of magic, like Robert Knorr. Oh, and the other one that I was going to tell you, which is a really important piece of magic, when I was at a convention, Dr. John DeMartini was speaking there, and I got into his book signing queue and said, you know, I've written a book for kids that talks about the same things that you are talking about. When I finish, would you read it? And he amazed me by saying yes and gave me his PA's email address. And I'd only just started writing at the time. And I hurried home with this email address like it was gold, you know, because I had said to him, well, I'll have it to you in 3 months. And I'd only just started. So I got busy writing and then sent it to him. And do you know that my family and I, the day after I sent it to him, which was literally 3 months and a day to the day that I said that I would, I received an email from him 10 days later saying, bravo, congratulations, this is what came to me as I read your lovely book. And he'd written the foreword. I hadn't even asked him for it. I was sort of hoping for a line of endorsement. And I got the foreword. You can imagine that opened some doors for me. So that was what I call magic. And how does magic come about? Mastery, through application of laws and principles, right? Anyway, back to the story. There was more magic along the way. There were more wonderful things that kept encouraging me when things got difficult and challenging and overwhelming, as they have all along the way. And one of them was winning this award, the Independent Book Publishers Award. So we won a bronze medal in the youth fiction category, and that was really special because that's an international award. And then there were things like, oh, here we go again, becoming an Australian bestseller. So as the book sold out, we would do another print run and another print run, and we're near to enter the fourth print run now, which has been really special. So there's over 12,000 books out there between Australia and China, which is really, really very special for someone who didn't think she was ever going to get published at one point, right? When I give talks about my journey, I have shared that I feel there are 3 keys to my story, 3 keys to turning one's life around. Number 1 is to educate yourself, right? Read, attend programs, all of that, educate yourself. Number 2, trust your heart. Do what you love, follow your heart, really listen. And you could say that was number 1, but in a way I needed to educate myself to trust my heart. So anyway, 1, 2, you can decide what the sequence is. Number 3, apply what you learn, right? Which is what this lesson is all about, isn't it? They're not just ideas. Don't leave them in books. Apply them in your life. Take action. Don't just think, well, that works for other people out there. It can work for you if you apply it and you give it enough time, enough patience, enough dedication and commitment and persistence and all of that. Listen to others because we learn from that. But trust yourself. Okay? Trust yourself. Use your judgment. Because what are we here for on this planet if not to realize our dreams and do what we love and listen to our hearts? I believe that's the whole point of this. It's that we create lives we love living because we're doing what we love. And when you look at history and you read the many biographies out there of people who've made a difference in the world and who have followed their heart and their intuition and their impulse to do the thing that inspired them, that they loved. They transform their lives. They leave a legacy for the world. I hope that you will get out of your own way, that you will not allow excuses or lack of belief in yourself to stop you, that you will listen to your heart and your intuition and trust yourself and leap out and do the thing that is important to you, achieve the things that matter to you. Create a life you would love living. Establish good habits by applying the things you learn. I hope you've enjoyed this session. I hope you're inspired to really hang in there with your goals, no matter how it might be looking at the moment. Next week, it's the 10th. Can you believe that? It's the 10th session. We're up to the last session. And the last session, really, don't you think, it should be a celebration. So we're going to review and reflect on everything we've learned and celebrate what we've achieved over the 10 weeks. Have a great week. And I'll see you on the forum, and let's perhaps share stories of people that we have learnt about who did follow through on a dream. Here's a last little word from me, like these 2. Dr. DeMartini, who couldn't read or write or communicate, so it seemed, and is now this, international billionaire, multi-book-selling, best-selling author, consultant, changing lives all over the world. Amazing story. Don Tolman, who as a boy heard a story. He was struggling with his school marks and losing in his fights with his brother, and heard a story about a food that would make people really strong and really smart. And he spent 17 years looking for that recipe. He went through an amazing journey and found it, and is now impacting so many lives. He's helping people get up out of wheelchairs. He's helping people on the brink of death to transform their health. That's an amazing thing to do because he trusted himself and he persisted through so many obstacles. Both of those gentlemen tell wonderful stories. Remember what Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right, because you're the X factor. I'll see you on the forum. Have a great week. hang on, there's something I forgot to tell you. Have you heard of Bob Proctor? He was featured on The Secret, and he has a program called You Were Born Rich, which is a fabulous program, very inspiring. And he tells a story I've never forgotten about two brothers. One of the brothers read all this stuff and applied it. And he started to transform his life, business success, financial success, relationship, like it was all going well for him. The other brother, you know how it is with siblings, right? You watch your brother or your sister do something, you go, well, I'm not going to do it because they did, And so he stood back and watched and saw his brother transform his life and kind of was a bit like me with that thought, I don't think it'll work for me. And he was struggling or not doing as well, anyway, as well as he would like. Things were not going so well. And he watched his brother and thought about doing the same stuff. He thought about it, and 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 he thought about it. But he didn't do it. Until one day, he got sick of thinking about it, and he started doing it. He began to apply all that stuff, those ideas, right? He learned about them, and he began to apply them as well, because they're not just ideas, right? And he said that he was shocked, surprised, and amazed by how quickly his life transformed once he began to apply these ideas. Go for it.